Welcome to episode 111 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And I was gonna put a joke here, but I ran 3 of them past test audiences. They all failed, and it eventually got cut for time.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host this podcast. And all I gotta say is gooble gobble, one of us.
That's right.
Namaste.
Because Mike Thorn is one of us today. Mike, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Gooble gobble.
Absolutely. So I had never seen Freaks before, and it's been on my list forever. Either like stuff would come up or it wasn't streaming somewhere, and I was like, $3.99, I don't know. But I loved this film, so I just want to say thank you for making me finally give in. I was reading about all like the alternate endings and stuff, and I'm so sad that stuff is like lost to history, because I think it'd be really fascinating to see the whole version. Anyway, yeah. So my question with that really fast was just like, have you seen this a lot of times? And like, if so, like at what point in your life did you first see this?
I think I probably first saw it, I don't know, I'd say within the past 10 years. And it was interesting to revisit it because over time, Tod Browning has become like my favorite director. So I've now since seen pretty much everything that's available from him, and it's fascinating to look at Freaks within the context of his filmography. I just love this film.
Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that about you. I was reading some stuff about him, like how he was actually in circus life, like he ran away and joined the circus and all that stuff. And I read that it's in a lot of his other films. Since you've seen so many, would you say that a lot of them like employ the same, like go get actual people with different physical whatevers? I don't know what to call them, but like, does he do that a lot with the other films too? Or was Freaks like the one where he did it, or?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, one of the most famous examples would be the film The Unholy Three from 1925. Which it's one of his many collaborations with Lon Chaney, but that film features a real little person in a prominent role. I mean, a lot of his projects with Lon Chaney would employ his trademark kind of physical, I guess, feats as an actor. He would bind himself so that it would appear that he had no arms and things like this. So. But yeah, Chaney was always also playing with drag and just bending normative representations of bodies on screen in ways that are so cool.
And now people just slip on like a little sleeve that gets edited out. It's amazing.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where would Chaney be in 2021?
He'd probably still be doing it the right way, and we'd all love it more because practical effects are always better.
True that. Yeah. No, but the circus milieu. Oh, I just wanted to say the circus milieu shows up. Yeah, in a lot of his films. Like, the characters in The Unholy Three have a background in circus life, and there's a film called The Mystic from the same year. And in 1927, he did The Show and The Unknown. So this is definitely building off that cumulative lifelong interest, which is rad. Very interesting.
Yeah, no, that was really fascinating to me reading about it. I just clearly didn't have time to watch a whole bunch of movies to know. So, but let's back up for a minute, because I was a shitty podcast host and didn't ask you to tell our listeners about yourself. Don't tell them about themselves. I mean, you could, but tell them about you and your books and what else you have going on, man.
Sure thing. So my debut novel, Shelter for the Damned, is currently available through Journalstone. And I think at the time this episode drops, my short story collection, Darkest Hours, the expanded edition, will also be available through Journalstone. And I have a second short story collection coming out in October through Journalstone called Peel Back and See. So, yeah, I write
great title.
Stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Very cool. All right, so let's go back to Browning and all of that. What made you choose Freaks? Like, I mean, you just said he's become your favorite director, but like, what is it about Freaks itself?
I think it's an interesting film to look at in terms of the legacy of quote unquote exploitation cinema and the way the film's reception at the time of its release might have cast it under an uncharitable light in that respect. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of exploitation cinema, and thinking about what do we mean when we say exploitation cinema, and just the things the film is doing with genre, I think are really fascinating to parse. And yeah, it's just one of Tod Browning's most, I think, kind of perfectly conceived movies. So I love it. I really love this movie.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I mean, I'm very late to the bandwagon by almost 100 years, but I'm here, man.
Hell yeah.
This is going to become something I watch every year. I can already tell because I just adored it. But you were talking about how it messes with genre a little bit. And would you like to kind of explain that? Because I think that was one of the things that really fascinated me about it.
Yeah, I think so. At the time the film was being developed, the producer Irving Thalberg was the one really pushing to get this made. And from the reports that I've read, it was an effort to respond to this kind of watershed double threat of Dracula and Frankenstein that came out in 1931. And given that Browning directed Dracula, he was hired on to work this project. But it's not a conventional horror film in many ways. I think the characterization of it as a horror film partially plays into the way 1932 audiences might have reacted to seeing these kinds of bodies just so frankly depicted on screen. It doesn't really dip into horror until the third act. It's really more of an ensemble drama, kind of a little bit of a noir, a proto-noir to some extent. So it's kind of dipping its toes in a lot of different genre pools, so to speak.
Yeah, one of the things that got me with it was it's not horror in the conventional sense to me, where it's trying to scare us. To me, right. It, like the scariest part of it to me was the way that people would react to seeing these humans just because they're different. But it's not just that idea; it's the way it's shot. Like, there's something about how you're supposed to look at this. And as the film goes on, like, you start feeling like an asshole for your original, like, I mean, you know, we're more used to this, but just that like original, like, oh shit, that's different, you know? And, and as the film progresses, like, it's so good at making you sympathize with these characters and see them as human and see the quote unquote normal person as the true evil. Right. But like, that's the person that you physically identify with, most people, right? And I thought it was just amazing how that twists that little bit of a horrifying feeling of why do we do this, and just how it makes you feel. Totally. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
no, you explained it well.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the way Browning frames the film, like that beginning with the Carney Barker tearing away the title card and basically addressing the audience, saying, "We didn't lie to you, folks. We told you we had living, breathing monstrosities." And we were immediately kind of called out as complicit in witnessing this freak show. But then the film kind of upends those expectations because we don't really see a lot of the circus performance. It's more about the day-to-day behind-the-scenes life of these people.
Yeah, and it's that behind-the-scenes life that really makes you identify with, again, not that they're not human from my point of view. I'm thinking 1932. Like, seeing them do quote-unquote human things, daily things, you know, things we all identify with. They're taking baths, they're hanging clothes up and washing them, they're having sex, they're having babies, you know, like all these things that we just take for granted on our daily level. And then I'm reading about audiences and how they like reacted so horrifically to this. And I wouldn't say that we're past that, but I would say it's not on that same level, right? But But I think that's where the strength is what I was saying. Go ahead, Don. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say it's definitely, I think you're right as far as talking about you see them as human beings, because the film humanizes or rehumanizes them when they've been reduced, and I hate to even say that, but they've been reduced to being oddities, to where people don't get to see their humanity, but they don't see each other as any different from anybody else. Like, I mean, the strangest thing to me from that perspective is when Hans is talking about Cleopatra and he says, "Oh, she's the most beautiful big woman I've ever seen, big person I've ever seen in my life." And just to think about the way that those modifiers are used, where typically we're talking about somebody as part of a marginalized community or different background or whatever, and you use their identity as the thing to determine what makes them special, or at least in contrast to what makes them special. So, she was so pretty for a blank, or, he's so smart for a blank. Mm-hmm. And I love how it's flipped right at the beginning where he says, she's the most beautiful big person I've ever seen. And from then on, you just see, at least from my viewing of it, my full viewing of it this time, as opposed to pieces of it, you get to see how they have as normal of lives as possible as you can have in a circus. In fact, they make the circus look boring.
Yeah.
That's a great line. They really do.
Totally. Huh. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, something else that's... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to...
Oh, no. Go ahead. You're the guest. You win. Go.
Oh, I just wanted to say, when we were talking about audience reactions to this film, I just, in prep for this episode, I read an article by Robin Larson and Beth Haller called Public Reception of Real Disability. And they talked about how part of the negative reception to this film at the time of release was that audiences felt it was distasteful to exhibit these types of bodies in a manner that was supposed to elicit shock. So I think they were misreading Browning's intentions.
Right.
And at this point in time, in 1932, they thought the more tasteful route, or the more humane route, was to keep these kinds of bodies relegated to medical context. Like, these are medical aberrations. These people are medically compromised. They should be pitied and kept out of sight, which is like more offensive, actually, right. I think, in many ways. Which that I found that very interesting.
Wow, I like that. Yeah. Well, I was just reading about like how people would like freak out and leave the theater and all that kind of stuff. I didn't even get into that. That's great. Go ahead, Don. Sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say that, strangely enough, one of the episodes of South Park was on this back. I mean, it was probably, they have their marathons and stuff. But it was and I'm probably going to get the title wrong, but it was their quote unquote freak show episode where they were making fun of those talk shows back in the 90s and early 2000s that would specifically bring on people with different types of abnormalities or deformities or differently abled people on for ratings. And what I remember from that time period is no one was really shocked in the sense of these people are being exploited. I mean, to the point where, a satirical comedy cartoon has to point out and say, like, you guys are exploiting these people for ratings and exploiting them to make yourselves feel good about your lives, when we should be learning about them. We should be doing something else, as opposed to we're going to trot them out for entertainment. And, that's not what I saw with Browning's piece with Freaks. Again, for me, it was you're getting to see these people to where they're not oddities. And if anything, like James said earlier, it flips it to where you see the quote unquote normal people as the ones who are the oddities, because of their behavior, because of the way that they are treating people, the way that they're ridiculing the others. You see that they are the problem. And in turn, we're the problem for treating them that way, or at least wanting to be interested in somebody because they might be a little weird looking or a little different, or there's something that we can look at and look to and point, or even feel sympathetic towards them when people just want to be treated like people.
For sure. Yeah. So the horror is a kind of moral monstrosity.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting that he does locate that within the most kind of normatively beautiful bodies with Cleopatra and Hercules, these deeply cruel and exploitative. They're really the exploiters in the film, right? So that's and the film like obviously engages with exploitation in the narrative, the way Cleopatra plays on Hans's kind of idolizing of her beauty in very twisted ways. So,
you know, one of the things I find interesting with this is if you took out the circus and you took out all of the people with different physical abnormalities, and you just like set this in a high school, the plot is exactly the same. Yeah. You have the cheerleader and the jock taking advantage of like a nerdy kid. You know what I'm saying? Like this plot is so universal and it's so ingrained in who we are as people, falling in love with someone who doesn't want us and who wants to use what we have or take something from us. And that in itself was very refreshing to me compared to what I expected going in, because some of the stuff I've seen over the years is extremely exploitive and extremely terrible. And what this did for me is it normalized it even more. Like all of these characters were in a plot that's been used in hundreds of thousands of things, you know? Like,
right.
I just thought that was another really great way of saying this is the human condition, and another way of pointing out, yes, they look different, but they're exactly like you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's this kind of archetypal, universal quality to it, as you say. That's true. That's interesting.
So, Don, what do you have in your notes? Because I know you've got something that you want to attack, I'm sure.
I've got a lot, and it really relates, for me, I mean, to kind of go off on this same, I guess, tone, is looking backwards at this film, or looking back at this film, roughly 89 years ago. I see this film as very progressive with its use of, and not exploitation, but their use of characters that have the same conditions as the people playing them, or vice versa. So there's not an issue of somebody's pretending to be have some type of mental disability or some cognitive delay or anything like that, or some type of genetic feature, or they're missing things, right? What I like about this is when we talk about representation, you know, you and myself, James, where we've been to panels, talked about it before, we often try and say things like, oh, you know, this is it's supposed to be about becoming more racially inclusive. When people who are talking about inclusivity and diversity within film and proper representation are talking about this type of stuff. Like, I mean, race, religion, different abilities, nationalities, things like that, sexual orientation, gender identity, to where you look at this and for me, I look at this and I get pissed off in the sense that you were making a great film, and because of people's discomfort with the people on film, you didn't really get to see too much of that. I recall, and I tried to look up the film, but there was a film when I was a kid that featured a young man who had Down syndrome, and it was an actual young man with Down syndrome, and not someone pretending or acting and portraying that condition. And it was about him and his family, and he goes and lives in a group home, you know, to become more independent, falls in love with a young lady who has Down syndrome, and they eventually get married, and the parents are sitting there thinking, I'm really worried about him. I'm worried about them. What's going to go on? And the two kids, they're grown at this point. They go upstairs, and then they come back down to the lobby of the hotel, and their parents are still there, like, because they're afraid to leave them, even though they're married. You know, they've got jobs. They're doing okay. They come back downstairs, because they're thinking, oh, and when they see them come back downstairs, they think, oh shit, they can't cope. They don't know how to deal with these things. The young man and his wife, his new wife, they go to the front counter and say, this is not the room that we paid for. We want to be, we want to be sent to, and it was all about showing that they were seeking to be independent, that they're capable, and that they shouldn't be pitied. Give me the tools and I can do the job. And I think that would have gone over so well to continue having people of different backgrounds, different abilities in films, in television, as opposed to hiding them away, because that's what was going on in real life. People were being hidden in institutions, as opposed to, this is my son, this is my daughter, my nephew, hey, he's just like anybody else. He has such and such condition. No different than you would refer to somebody who might be diabetic. You're not going to treat them any differently other than maybe watching out what they eat or monitoring things like their blood sugar, but you're not going to treat them as though there's something wrong with them. And I think that at least in recent years, we've gotten better. We could do a whole lot more, but we've gotten better. I think we missed out on a great opportunity to see this, to spread out even more, to where more people could see people of different conditions, different backgrounds, different abilities as being just as normal as they are.
Yeah, I actually think Freaks still plays like a radically progressive movie today. Oh, yeah. It's still like I don't think you could make Freaks now. I think it's actually, and I think you're right. The reception to the film, and I think the misreadings of the film, did some damage in terms of those kind of that kind of forward momentum with representation that you're discussing. Someone I see playing with that legacy, who is very openly influenced by Tod Browning, is Rob Zombie, and he'll cast characters of I guess you would say non-normative physical appearances in some of his work. He's also openly toying with the exploitation tradition in ways that are complicated, but you don't see anything. I mean, this was an MGM film too. Like, right. This was a major studio picture. It's kind of stunning to see a studio picture like this from 1932, even pre-code. It's just wildly progressive.
Well, I would say probably only other ones I would say would be the Farrelly brothers. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because they've done the same. Now, they've had some complications with certain things where they could have given a more prominent role to a character who had developmental delays instead of having an actor portray that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they're great otherwise, as far as having characters who have mobility issues, have cognitive issues in their films.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about There's Something About Mary. I mean, they showed how, because her brother had a developmental delay, that she volunteered. She took these grown men, took these guys and these women to the park, took them to games, did all these things with them. And I thought that was so great. One, because they weren't making fun of any of those people, right? They weren't used as the butt of a joke for anything, as far as what I can remember from seeing the film a few times.
Mm-hmm. No,
they weren't
agree.
used as the butt of a joke. And it definitely showed that, and I'm going to keep going back to this, and I hate using this term, it keeps showing them as normal, active members of a community, as opposed to, oh, look at that. Let's not stare. Let's not. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable. Let's not stare at them. When the truth is, they want to be seen. There's a difference as far as looking at you because I think that you're, an oddity, as opposed to I'm looking at you because I want to see you. I actually want to acknowledge your presence. To the point. One of the things I definitely sticks out to me in that film is the one young man who is always hitting on Mary and saying, like, hey, we're going out on a date. We're going to the movies. And she says, hey, what if Sarah finds out about this? And he's like, oh, don't tell her. And it just shows like how, even in that sense, you have these guys that are like, they see a cute girl, they want to talk to them. And it's kind of like, oh, you just called me out, But I would honestly like to see more of that, because I think that's what's missing, or one of the things that's missing when we're having this discussion about representation is seeing the people that are in our communities in film as well, but which is equally as important, if not more important, than people of those backgrounds to see themselves in those films, because their impression perception of themselves is probably going to increase. But the people who have the power to make any changes, when they see these people in these films, they need to have more of their perspective change. And that's one of those things that can happen.
Yeah, for sure. The Farleys are a great example. But, and I love their work. There's Something About Mary is, fucking incredible film.
You know, you were saying you couldn't make this today. And I was kind of like running it forward in my head, right? And all I can see is like you'd have some movie studio that would be all over this, right? And nobody else would want to touch it. And then it would start online. And every single side would attack it with having no idea what's happening.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine if Browning would have had to deal with that on top of like word of mouth destroyed this film and his career, to be honest. But you don't just take $164,000 loss in 1931. You know, they were terrified of what word of mouth did then. Like, if you hit this with the internet and every troll and every person who has to get their say in, even the people supporting it, right? Like, it would get so crazy out of hand. And I'm fascinated by what would have happened if they had had the internet in 1931 and this happened.
Here's what would have happened. And this is just going off of similar things that have happened with films. There would be enough buzz. The film would be so polarizing that people who hadn't intended to see it would go and see it. And it would be the same thing as the interview with Franco and Seth Rogen.
I forgot all about that film.
Yeah, it was, the studio had to bail on the film because of the sensitive nature of, hey, we're killing a world leader in this movie, right? To where people were, getting prints and renting out theaters because their idea was like, oh no, we need to see this movie. We need to see what all the hoopla is about, what all the anger is about. And when you go see the movie, you're like, it's so freaking comically ridiculous. You kind of question, like, what was the point of the outrage? And I think
machine.
I think that would be the same thing with this, where maybe somebody would take advantage of public outrage and say, like, I was so uncomfortable making this movie. I don't know what I signed up for. And they use that to feign disgust about the film in order to get people to come and see it.
I could see that.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. Now that you bring in the internet, I can't even imagine the Twitter discourse. Good God. Oh, man. That's a horror movie.
Well, because the Ringer, when that came out with Johnny Knox, it was Johnny Knoxville, right? It was hailed by several different disability groups, and I believe even by the Special Olympics, because of the way that they treated the athletes and the actors that were participating in the film, to where they were, again, they weren't the butt of any jokes. All the jokes were on Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah.
And the assholes of the film, like his uncle, who, used the R word repeatedly and said, oh, well, you can go in here. I gotta win some money. Go in here and do this event. And, we can make bank. All you have to do is go beat all these R words. And so it just keeps going and going. Right. And I remember that film itself, again, in the age of the internet, there was backlash, but, Special Olympics and I forgot the name of another group. They actually came to the defense and like, no, we sanctioned this movie. We supported this movie because they came to us and wanted input as far as how to appropriately go about this topic and treat the people that are going to be in this film. So they, one, aren't the butt of the joke. And then two, again, are treated with respect and represented correctly.
I love that film. I still randomly just shout out, when the fuck did we get ice cream? But
I haven't seen that one.
You should, because you'll
really
spend the
good.
rest of your life asking that question.
I like
again,
Knoxville, so
you could see some direct connections between this film and The Ringer because of the way that the quote unquote normal people are treating and talking about people that they designate as freaks or as weirdos or something's wrong with them. To the point where Johnny Knoxville's character, when he goes into this, he has a complete change of how his perception on these individuals, his change of his perception on how they are and who they are.
Well, and even not to just talk about The Ringer all day, but another thing that I think really works in regards to freaks with The Ringer is everyone who's not Knoxville has way better advice, way better life experience. Like, they are so much more grounded and understand the world around them. And that's one of the things I love about the film. And I think that really works here too. Like, you have Hans, and while he's madly in love with this girl, supposedly, like, you know, he's at the end, like with the poison, you know, he's playing her. Like, he's more grounded. He's got a grasp of the reality of the world he's in. And I think that the two really coincide, and I can't believe I didn't even think of this. So thank you, Don.
Oh, you're welcome.
There you go,
I have my moments.
You have it on recording. I thanked Don for something.
I'm going to add that movie to the endless queue.
There you go.
Yeah.
5 years from now, tell us how you liked it.
Exactly. Yeah.
To go back to Freaks, or, you know, that one scene where you get to, well, actually, there are a couple of things that are interesting when you're talking about updating this film or addressing this film. Language has definitely changed, right? Because even in the synopsis, and I'm quoting this because after dealing with, or at least after learning and understanding terminology and dealing with misuse of terminology, understand how important it is to make sure that when people tell you that this is a term that they don't want to be called by, you respect their wishes and respect who they are and don't use those terms. So in the synopsis, the official synopsis for the film, and even in the movie poster, because I will look at a few things, they refer to Hans as a midget, like throughout, right? And of course, in the film, they refer to him as that a couple of times. But just the language, again, would completely change unless you specifically want to draw out, demonstrate who exactly are the villains by having them say those terms. But I also love that the one scene where they're in the woods and the family is out in the woods and they're dancing, they're enjoying themselves, they're playing, and you know, just the distraction, or at least the disorienting sight that they provide for, you know, those two men who are walking through the woods, as well as probably for viewers, because now they're seeing these people enjoying themselves, right? You got someone who does not have a lower part, you know, he's torso on up. You have the three sisters who I think the condition they suffer from is microcephaly.
Yes.
And you have a couple of little people that are involved in this. And so you're watching and you're thinking to yourself, like, well, shit, this is exactly how you would play with your kids on the weekend. Like, they're out in the woods playing hide and seek, dancing, singing songs, skipping around. But I love the idea that, or at least the relationship that they have with their mother, or their recognized mother, the one who's taking care of them, to where they see her as their protector and they immediately run to her when those men show up. And then she explains, hey, these are my children, and that they're no different than anybody else's children. You know, I don't want them to be treated any differently. And that stayed with me as the movie progressed, because you don't see them treated indifferently. Even the clown Frozzo, he's like flirting with one of the girls. And then when he flirts with another girl, the one girl gets mad and like walks up to him and like hits him in the chest, because he went from flirting with her to flirting with his sister. Or just all these ways that you see how there's a family connection that they have when they're first discovered. And that family connection never goes away through the entire film. And it even gets reinforced with things like the one of us when they let Cleo know, like, hey, you're with us. And they don't see it as we're welcome you into our group as a freak. We're welcoming you into our family as a member of this family. Mm-hmm. And she just gets so offended that they're saying, hey, you're one of us, you're with us, you're one of us. And to the point where she causes a scene, and all the rest of them are like, what the hell's her problem? Like, we're cool with you. Like, why would you do it? And that's when it really gets ramped up to where you understand, fuck all these normal people. They're the assholes. They're really assholes, because here you are, these people who have never felt as though they're different. And then you yell up, I'm not a freak like any of you. You're all freaks. I'm not a freak. And just how warm, how wonderful these people went to just kind of the sadness, the mood of that room completely changes.
Yeah, that wedding scene is definitely worth unpacking. I'm glad you brought that up, Don. And actually, it's interesting that you brought up the scene when these characters are playing and just having fun in the woods, and these men enter the scene. In both that and the wedding scene, we see the quote unquote normal folks as the kind of threats, or
right.
That they're kind of disrupting these really kind of beautiful, innocent in many ways moments. And the wedding scene, I think is just like, I mean, that's probably one of the most often cited and kind of parodied and replicated scenes in this film. To me, the most horrifying part of that scene is after Cleopatra has that outburst where she calls them freaks and filth, and she kisses Hercules right in front of her new husband, Hans. When she makes him play like horseyback with him, she completely dehumanizes him. That scene is just so uncomfortable and disturbing because of that dehumanizing. So her and Hercules really are the monsters there. That's that moral monstrosity we were discussing.
Well, and it really plays into how the physical limitations, like, just fuck poor Hans. Like, he can't put up a fight against Hercules. And when they lift him up and put him up there, he doesn't have anywhere to go. He can't just get out of this, you know? And so everything that he's spent the whole movie saying about, I'm a man and I'm this and I'm that, and they can so easily take it from him. And that is just heartbreaking. For me, it just killed me. Like, it makes you a child. Like, you have no say in anything. And you just have to take this. I don't know if you guys know this, but this is all based on a short story called Spurs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And have you read it, Mike, or not?
I haven't. No, I knew it was based on that, but I haven't read it yet.
I haven't read the actual story. I just read like a summary of it. And basically the same sort of thing happens. Like, the woman who's doing all this puts him up there, and she's like, you're gonna ride me like a horsey all across the land and stuff like that. And he literally gets spurs and forces her to really do it. And he's like kicking her in the shoulders and the neck to make her keep walking up and down the countryside to punish her for doing this to him. Wow. And right. And I think that is additionally heartbreaking because Hans doesn't have that opportunity. He can't just get revenge right there. Mm-hmm. He can't take control of the situation. He's just fucked by what they did to him. And then on top of all that, they poison him as well.
Yeah. Both he and Frida are such tragic characters, too, because Frida also sees the way that Cleopatra is exploiting Hans, but he just can't see it. He's so smitten and so kind of intoxicated by this fantasy that he's unable to hear out his partner, Frida. And, she's saying, this woman is just exploiting you. She's manipulating you. That's a really heartbreaking dynamic right there.
Well, and I felt so bad for her because she just gives up. She literally just thinks, I can't compete with this woman. There's nothing I have to offer. Like, it's so just, I don't know, just horrible to watch how Frida must be feeling, you know? Like she loves him so much that she's giving up because she feels she can't compare. And I felt that was really sad.
Absolutely. I agree. So sad. Well,
it goes back to the limitations and the, just how society would have treated both of them up to this point. And I think that backstory in itself makes sense. Like, he's after this to prove he's a man and to prove he's this idealized version of what he thinks he's supposed to be. And Freda does the same thing, but the opposite way. It's this idealized version she can't compete with. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, that's a really interesting point to think about how Hans and Frida perceive Cleopatra and the way that figures into the film's commentary, like how Hans idolizes her as this kind of penultimate, the kind of ultimate figure of beauty. And Frida is, envies her for that as well, for her kind of idealized feminine form. So that's fascinating to see the way Browning plays with that dynamic, for sure. And when you brought up the poisoning, I was just thinking about how, and the element of the spurs in the story, I think something that is often divisive in this film is the way the final act of vengeance is depicted, where the quote unquote circus freaks exact their revenge, and the way that's directed and shot as a horror sequence. To me, I think within the logic of the film's narrative, I don't see it as exploitative. I think it's a kind of cathartic scene, but it's a violent scene, and he's maximizing on the tension of the violence. But I don't know. How do you guys feel about the way the narrative culminates there?
Don, would you like to go first?
I mean, do you mean as far as the way the revenge that's done, or the lead up to it?
I guess both. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I wrote down, and this is exactly what I wrote down. Quote unquote, the freaks are some fucking gangsters.
Hell yeah.
And when I did that, I was sitting there because I didn't, I don't do the spoilers, and I know I've seen a good bit of the film, but I didn't remember anything as far as how it ended. Mm-hmm. But that whole part where Cleopatra knows she's done, right? Because you got one guy who's polishing his gun, the other one who's polishing his knife, and they're kind of like, "You fucked with our boy. We're gonna go ahead and take care of you."
Yeah. Can I say really fast? I absolutely loved that because the one pops the knife and he starts cleaning it, and it's like, yeah, that's right. When the second one pulled out the gun, I laughed so hard because I'm like, there's nothing normal about pulling out your gun and cleaning it. Like, the knife is threatening, but you could still sort of write it off, Yeah,
maybe he's going to pull out an apple or something.
That gun, hilarious to me. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I love that because for me, it gave them agency right there, right? It's not an issue of, somebody else is going to get justice for them. Obviously, Hans couldn't do it by himself, right? Because of the physical limitations. But there's also that strength in their numbers, that strength in this family organization that they've created. We're kind of like, no, that we're going to stick together. We're going to help each other out. And if one of us gets screwed over, we've all been screwed over. So we're going to make sure that nobody's going to mess with us. So I love the way that they are able to take power or achieve power in that role. Even if it was something as simple as they scared the shit out of Cleopatra and she left. Like, that would have worked for me too, as far as like, we're going to get you away from him. We're not going to, allow you to take his money or kill him or do anything like that. We figured out what you're doing, and we're not going to have it. The only problem I have with the scene is, or I should say this whole series, is the same thing that happened to a good number of films around the same time period, where they cut things out. Like there's a Mae West film, Klondike Annie, where she kills her husband, and the censors basically ruled like, you can't do this. We can't have a woman killing a man on screen. We can say that you did it. We just can't show it. Mm-hmm. And even the alternate endings that were for this film, where they castrate, or it's implied they castrate Hercules.
Yeah,
and he's part of the sideshow now, and they mutilate Cleopatra and then tar and feather her and turn her into a duck or a chicken. I would have, again, you could have shown them closing in on her, pulling out the feathers, doing something, right? You didn't have to show them, cutting limbs off or anything like that. But you could have given me a little bit more, because at the end, I think it takes me out of it a little bit, because her comeuppance is funny to me. I mean, it would be funny either way, but I think it takes me out of that same tone and mood that I was in when it was tense. They were chasing her down, and then all of a sudden it's like, look, and you hear her quacking or bucking there, and you're like, it's funny, but
yeah, it's such a violent change. Like, it's great. Yeah. It is. I really like it, but as you're saying it, like, it goes from night to well lit. It goes from this dark horror, like everybody moving in, to it is funny. It's just her quacking, and it's hilarious. And it's also great. Like, it's that moment that you're like, yeah, take that, but it does. It's just a really jarring switch right there. Mm-hmm. I almost wish that at some point they would have been like, we could tar and feather her, and then you'd kind of laugh it off. And then at the end, you'd be like, oh, shit.
Right.
Right.
Like, I mean, but so for me, you talked about the divisiveness of this. And I think that comes from the way it's shot, kind of like I believe you already said. And it plays with our preconceived notions, right? Like, it's the threat of the little people coming after us, and it's the way they look and how they suddenly have power. And anytime that oppressed people have power, it becomes scary. Mm-hmm. And I'm a white male, so I can say that. No, I couldn't resist. But no, really, like, that's the terror, right? Like, oh shit, they can fight back.
Right.
And I sat and thought about this a lot, because I don't know, I worked in group homes for like 10 years. And so I'm always thinking, like, when disabilities of any kind are portrayed, what would it be if it was somebody else in this that was casted instead? Like, if this wasn't a part of the character. And I think, again, if all of this was gone and it was a quote unquote normal cast, whatever you want to say, like, this would still be a really creepy moment, and it would still be a great moment of revenge. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's not exploitive, because we're giving that same power to these characters when they need it that we would give anybody else in this situation. So while I get that it was divisive, that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was just thinking back. Oh, yeah, with Dawn's comments about the censorship. It's interesting because, yeah, although this is pre-Hays Code, so it's a pre-code film, which means, it still plays as very edgy by the standards of films that would come out later in the 1930s, it was still screened for censors. The process just wasn't as, I guess, strictly mandated or strictly, I guess you could say, prescriptive as the Hays Code would later be. But it's fascinating because you compare this to, like, The Black Cat, which comes out 2 years later, and you get pretty explicit indication that Bela Lugosi is skinning Boris Karloff alive. So I think the fact that they censored certain details out of this film must have just been from the kind of outrage and shock that people had at seeing these previously kind of unseen sorts of bodies on screen throughout the film. So they probably thought it's too much if we also allow for that kind of on-screen violence at the end. Yeah, it's interesting to think what kind of logic would have gone into those decisions.
Well, and also, I mean, they cut almost a full half an hour from this film.
Yeah.
Because it was almost 90 minutes, and now it's, what, like 62 or something like that. which I just want to throw out to filmmakers today. 62 is a great runtime. Tell your stories faster so I can watch more stuff. Zack Snyder, fuck off. But yeah, the whole Hays Code, there's so much of this film that couldn't happen that has nothing to do with the cast. But like, there's adultery in this. You can't have adultery in the Hays Code. There's so much sex in this, like for the time, you know?
Yeah.
And all of that would be gone. Like you'd lose major points of what this film is about. You take Hercules. Everything Hercules does is about his dick. The entire film. Mm-hmm. And that's why it sucks that his ending, well, got cut. That's a great joke. I should have used that at the beginning. Damn it. But no, like everything builds to him being castrated. His whole drive, his whole plot is his penis.
Yeah.
And they castrate him. And that's lost to history. None of us are ever going to see this scene or how it played out. And I read something like he had to sing falsetto at the end to be a castrati, basically, and to really be a part of the freak show. And I think that is such great plotting, like to literally make everything this guy does about how he ends, and then it just got chopped. Sad.
R.I.P. castration.
The irony.
I guess we get a little bit of that that kind of circular narrative irony when we have Cleopatra introduced as the peacock of the air at the beginning, and at the end she becomes like the kind of defiled hen of the cage. But I agree. That would have been a remarkable scene to have in the film, but alas.
It makes me wonder how much other stuff we lost. Like, there's the whole code of the freaks where if you offend one of us, you offend all of us. And we get a lot of that. But I really felt there could have been more build to that in different places where like they're starting to turn on her and like talking more and they really cashed in on like the creepy factor instead. Mm-hmm. Like when they're all under like the little trailers and like staring through the stairs and stuff, that's creepy shit. It works really well. But what I like about it is it makes narrative sense to scare Cleopatra, and it really works with the audience too. But yeah, I would have liked to see even more like plotting and kind of like, nah, man, we got your back, you know? It still works, but I just would have liked more. So I wonder if that's in the cut stuff too.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a record somewhere of I wonder if the shooting script is available anywhere, but you're right. I mean, there was a significant chunk cut out, so I'd love to see if that's floating around somewhere.
Well, if anyone knows, send it to us. Let us know.
Yes, please.
All right, so switching gears for a second, I just want to say that there's one part in this film that's really weird for the context of what it is, but it works great for the audience. And it's when Frozo's in the bathtub. And the way the camera shoots it, he looks like he's taking a bath. And he's in there and, Venus is all ready for their date. And she's like, let's go. I'm all dressed up. And he's like, I already started this because I forgot about that. And then he pops out and you find out that this bathtub is a prop that he's using for a joke. And it's got wheels that he's putting on and whatever. But it's so weird because this is just a joke for the audience. This would not work on her at all. Like, she's standing there. She knows he's not in the tub. I don't know. I found that hilarious. What did you guys think of it?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah, me too. I think that's just Browning the carny, bringing his experience to the screen. He does that sometimes, plays with like optical illusions and circus tricks on screen. The way he brings that to cinema is really unique.
I read something about him using magic on screen. Like, do you know what that was in reference to? Because I do not.
I think that would be in Miracles for Sale and Mark of the Vampire, which are later those are late career films of his. Really interesting movies. Mark of the Vampire is particularly peculiar and makes a lot of use of optical illusions and magic tricks. So I imagine probably those two would be the ones.
Nice. Yeah, it just said that when he was in the circus, he spent time learning magic and then he used it in some of his films. But what I read didn't really go into it, so I didn't know what he did. So,
yeah, I would think it would be those ones. I don't know the exact details, but yeah, it's a really interesting case of a director's background playing so explicitly into his filmography in vaudeville and circus life.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of his stuff, but the stuff I've seen, you can definitely tell he loved that time or respected it or however you want to say it. You know, like it's clearly something he treasured and wanted to share or relive or yeah. But the bathroom, the other thing I like, or the bathtub, the other thing I like about it is it reminds the audience that we're the audience.
Right.
Like you're still here for the freak show. And I kind of wonder if that's why so many people left, because they came to this wanting to see the freak show. And this film flips it on your ass and makes you an asshole for wanting to see the freak show. And I could see how that in itself would have also hit some word of mouth that, you know, attacked the film. So,
well, I got a question for both of you related to freak show. Have either of you gone to one?
No, I haven't.
Well, I haven't. I remember them, you know, state fairs and county fairs, you know, probably up through the 90s. At least what I can recall, where you would have something that, you know, a two-headed alligator, or, you know, you'd have somebody who was a contortionist. And of course, there's always the omnipresent at every one of these fairs and you know, the bearded lady. And I was so glad when she made her appearance, because I felt like you've got all this going on and you're missing the ones that we always hear about being at these places. And the bearded lady makes a great appearance because she just had a baby. And even with that, you know, this moment where you are thinking you're going to get this freakish moment, right? Because it's this really skinny guy with an awkward gait who's walking up to Hercules and the guys who are playing cards. And they congratulate him because you're thinking like, oh, he's going to do something. They're going to treat him horribly, because you're still waiting for something for these people to be exploited. But he comes up and they're like, congratulations. What'd you have? It was a girl. Better luck next time. You know, it's just one of those things where they're like, they're screwing with him, joking with him like he's a friend. I don't want to give Hercules too much credit for this scene, but it's that one moment where you're sitting there bracing for, oh, something's coming. And then you get relieved because what comes is he's being treated like a normal person. He jokes back with them and he says something to the point where like, hey, I've been trying, you know, he makes a very clean sex joke in the movie. And I'm sure the audience probably picked that up. Well, the audience in the 1930s, they probably would have thought of it as like, oh, that's funny, but that's awkward because I don't know if I should laugh at that or not. He made the joke. Laugh at the fucking joke. like don't look at it as like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to think about them having sex because then I'm going to feel weird. And, you know, because humans don't have sex.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I think the way you guys are describing how the discomfort probably came from audiences maybe expecting the distancing that you would normally get if you're spectating a freak show, but the film actually just immerses you in the daily life of these people, as you said, like having kids and joking with each other and, you know, having rivalries and relationships. I think that is probably a big part of what made people uncomfortable, is that normalcy applied to the types of bodies that they would normally relegate to the category of the abnormal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even that scene with the conjoined twins, or one of the scenes with the conjoined twins. And I think Frozzo, you know, he did the whole thing. It's like, hey, close your eyes. And he pinched, you know, the one sister on her arm to see if they could, you know, get the same sensation or share the sensations. But then you see the other gentleman, he gets mad with that, you know, this guy was touching his girl. But then it goes even further where he tells the other sister, or the sister who's conjoined to his fiance, he's like, when we get married, it's just going to be her and me. It's just going to be the two of us. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, that's a funny joke to include.
Yeah.
Because one, there's the issue of you had actual conjoined twins doing this, right?
Yep.
He's got the joke about he's going to be alone with his wife when they get married. And the parallel to that with sisters who are that close. I mean, not physically that close, but are that close to where it's kind of like, no, like we're going to live in our own house. We're going to have our own kids. Like you can't live with us. To where he's caught that same familiarity that somebody in the audience should have had with their sister-in-law of like, oh man, she's always over at my house. Like they're always hanging out. They're always doing this. They're practically connected at the hip. Whereas in this case, the two sisters, Daisy and Violet, are connected at the hip.
I love how the one's always like, no, because I gotta go. And then she would, because the other one can't stay if she leaves, you know. And they make the joke twice, which kind of ruined it. But he says like the exact same line when she's leaving about how she always does this and this is her alibi and whatever, you know. And that kind of ruined it for me just because he said it exactly the same way. But outside of that, it's a great joke. It's like, yeah, you can think that she's staying here, but hey, I'm leaving, so she's not, you know. And then you have the creepy factor when the one is making out with somebody and the other one's sitting there enjoying it. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, because the one conjoined twin kind of closes her eyes and she's clearly enjoying what the other twin is doing, you know? And I like how that basically makes your mind travel and wonder about their wedding nights and other days, you know? And yet it's not there. It's a joke that you wrote in your mind. And I thought that was masterful writing in itself.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. I got nothing else. Do either of you?
For me, I don't want to speak for Mike.
Yeah, no, I think we covered it all too. Nothing comes to mind.
Cool. Then we will jump into films you would recommend if people liked this movie. So Mike, would you like to go first?
Sure. I guess earlier I brought up some of Tod Browning's other circus films. So I'd say if you enjoyed Freaks, I'd recommend his 1927 film, The Unknown, which, if you ask me on the right day, I'd say that's my favorite Tod Browning film. Features an incredible performance by Lon Chaney and plays with, again, representations of disability and sexuality. And I think it's one of the best silent horror films of all time. So that would be my recommendation. Check out Tod Browning's The Unknown.
Cool. Don, what do you got?
All right. I'm going to start off with a serious film. It was nominated for an Oscar this year for, I think it was full feature documentary. The film is called Crip Camp, and it discusses or analyzes, excuse me, it doesn't analyze. It demonstrates the relationships that were formed by children and teenagers in the late 60s, early 70s that would go away to these camps that were for disabled youth. And, you know, they just collected their videos, photos, all this stuff. And a few of the people who had gone created their documentary to talk about the camp, the community that they formed there, the family they formed, the fight for disabled rights. I mean, it's you know, I've seen a good bit of it, and it's just one of those things where you kind of like this film, you think about the progress we could have made if we were paying attention, you know, on certain things to where even now there are issues when it comes to ADA compliance with jobs and housing and things like that. But it makes you question, one, why haven't we why haven't we been faster or better about it? But then two, the idea that, you know, these folks had their own community, continue to have their connections, and it's something that we all need to be aware of. But as far as other films, Frankenstein, Hunchback of Notre Dame, King Kong, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane,
nice,
Charlie Chaplin Circus,
hell yeah.
Dumbo, we mentioned The Ringer, but all the films that I listed aside from Crip Camp have to deal with the other, in how there is this freak show aspect to whatever is appearing, whether we're talking about Quasimodo, we're talking about King Kong, talking about Dumbo. There's this idea that that person is the oddity, something wrong with them, and then you realize that there isn't shit wrong with them. It's everybody's perception that's wrong. What do you have, James?
Like that.
Yeah, that's a great list of records.
I mean, I'm going to start with American Horror Story Freak Show.
I left that for you, man. I
was toying with whether I want to, because some of it's problematic, but Ryan Murphy is problematic altogether. I love American Horror Story and I love Ryan Murphy, but there's things that I question, like whether he writes endings of seasons before he begins. So I would definitely say Freak Show. Freak Show is so well done, and there's so many obvious tie-ins to Freaks. And so, yeah, if you like this, I would definitely recommend that. I would recommend The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 25, which covers Freaks. Let's see, what else? Obviously, The Ringer, which we talked about already, but I just want to keep saying that because it doesn't seem like as deep of a movie as it actually is. Wonder. I don't know if either of you have seen Wonder. My son loves it.
I remember that. Yeah.
It really plays into like having disabilities and going to a school and bullying and all of that kind of stuff, as well as just it makes you unique, not an outsider. And so I would definitely throw that in. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but I'm sure as soon as I log off, I'll be like, yes, go ahead.
Oh, Mask.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And you're talking about a real person story. Of course, I believe they used prosthetics for the film, but you're talking about a real person story who actually went through that. And again, it was a condition that not too many people were aware of until the film came out. And once the film came out, the kind of same thing. You realize that, this guy's just a normal guy. You don't have to look at him as if he's weird or something's wrong with him. He's a normal dude.
It's weird how that's ingrained in us, isn't it?
I know.
Like by society. Yeah.
We're so used to, and I would say this as far as our childhoods, as far as growing up in the 80s, you became so focused on, or at least this groupthink idea, this groupthink aspect of, you have to point out what's wrong with somebody else so somebody doesn't point out what's wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can point out what's weird about them, I'm part of the group, and I get to survive, as opposed to let's make that other person a part of this big group that we have. And we don't have to treat anybody as if something's wrong with them, or look at them as though something's wrong with them.
Make them one of us.
Yes. One of us. One of us. Google gobble. Google. No?
All right, Mike, so let's bring this back to you. You want to tell people where to find you on social media and how to order your book and such things?
Yeah, for sure. My website is mikethornwrites.com. You can contact me through there, and there are lots of links and interviews and stuff on that site. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Mike Thorn Writes on both of those. And you can get Shelter for the Damned and Darkest Hours through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual avenues for those two. So, yeah. And I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for having me on again. Always a blast talking
thank
with
you for coming on.
Yes. Yeah, you're welcome anytime, man. We have a great time with you. So
cheers.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up for this week. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you back here at thenecronama.com.